Okay. So delayed revascularization is a huge big term. Big term means what it means by delay. There is no official definition. Is it more than 6 hours? That means beyond golden hour. Is it beyond 12 hours, beyond the capacity of thrombolysis of primary PCI? Or if is it extreme delay beyond 24 hours? So delayed covers everything. So first question, why there should be any delay? So if there are a few reasons. First of all, facilities for primary PCI is not available. This is a common phenomenon in our country. Second thing, delayed arrival outside golden hour. This is another problem in our country for various reasons. Third, the new problem, suspected diagnosed COVID infection. We don't know what to do. But already my esteemed colleague, Professor Mir Jamaluddin, has given the guideline about it. Fourth, patient consent not available, and there is misdirected advice, which really not scientific and beyond scope of discussion here. So why this is so important? Why to avoid delay? Why is this important for management of acute MI and rational for early reperfusion? The main aim to prevent death, limit the extent of mitral damage, and minimize patient discomfort. The strategy to reestablish myocardial perfusion before irreversible damage occurs. It can be done mechanically by primary PCI, or pharmacological by thrombolysis, or pharmacoinvasive by combination of pharmacological and mechanical intervention. So primary PCI has been discussed by Dr. Mir Jamaluddin, so I'm not going to do that anymore. We're going to the second one, mainly for the delayed who are beyond the primary PCI. So primary PCI, if it's not possible, primary PCI first of all is the gold standard of care. There's no second question about it. If primary PCI is not if primary PCI is not possible for whatever reason, then thrombolysis is a must. The question is, after thrombolysis, what to do and how soon to do something. Let's talk about a little bit about thrombolysis, thrombolytic agents. There are mainly two groups. One is non-fibrin specific and another is fibrin specific. The non-fibrin specific is streptokinase, and non-fibrin and fibrin specific is these three: alteplase, reteplase, and tenecteplase. These are all tissue plasminogen activator. So the first generation is the streptokinase. This is non-specific, and the second generation, the TPA, is alteplase, and third generation tenecteplase. These all three are available in our country. Tenecteplase is expensive, alteplase was expensive, but streptokinase is very cheap. However, keeping in mind, streptokinase reperfusion is not always successful, is very low preferential rate. However, the administration of the thrombolysis is very simple. Streptokinase we all know. Alteplase is also given as a bolus dose. Tenecteplase, which commonly now used nowadays, although expensive but very easy to use. All this TPA should be followed by IV heparin immediately. That must be kept in mind. This is in addition of the aspirin bolus dose to everyone, whoever is eligible. Now the question comes, once you're given thrombolysis, what is to do next? There are two ways. One is facilitated PCI, the other is pharmacoinvasive strategy. The facilitated PCI was defined as fibrinolysis followed by immediate PCI within 2 hours, irrespective of fibrinolytic success. Doesn't matter whether ST elevation is resolved or not, you go for the PCI. And pharmacoinvasive strategy was defined as fibrinolysis followed by rescue PCI or by routine elective PCI beyond 3 hours of fibrinolytic administration. This is a guideline from AHA. This is the ESC guideline of STMI elevation and pharmacoinvasive thing. As you can see, as Professor Mir Jamaluddin mentioned, the same thing. Estimate within time period is 24 hours. Within 2 hours, if facility is available, go transfer the patient to PCI center, do a primary PCI. It's more than 2 hours, give a bolus fibrinolytic within 10 minutes. Within 90 minutes, transfer to PCI center and assess If the reperfusion is successful, then you go for routine PCI as a pharmacoinvasive. If not successful, for rescue. Now I'm telling you this thing. Now, what are the evidences of this facilitated PCI or pharmacoinvasive strategy? Is evidence number one. The evidence is efficacy. The first study published in 2020, Annals of Global Health, efficacy and safety of pharmacoinvasive strategy versus primary PCI in the management of STMI, a prospective countrywide registry. This was actually more mid-distance study. The first of all patients are divided into primary PCI strategies number 646, and they followed up right after 1 year. Eventually ended up 520 patients, 84% patient ended to follow up 1 year. Thrombolysis 591 patients at the end of 1 year, 82% completed the follow-up thing. I'm not going to detail. This is the grid chart showing the results, and it's showing the primary PCI pharmacy at 1 year. Not much difference. There's slight differences in some patients of the primary PCI most of the time. The overall p-value is not really significant. And this is the 1 year survival chart. The broken chart is the pharmacoinvasive, and this is the primary. And there's not much difference. So the conclusion of the study that STMI patients treated with pharmacoinvasive strategy have comparable outcomes to those treated with primary PCI, with no increase of major bleeding, and this real-world data support the use of pharmacoinvasive strategy when primary PCI cannot be achieved in a timely fashion. Evidence 2, this is a pharmacoinvasive strategy versus primary PCI in STMI in clinical practice, published in Circulation in October 2019. It's a vital heart response registry from Canada. It's a good number of patients, 3,287 STMI patients, out of which 55% patient treated with tenecteplase plus PCI later, and 45% patient treated with primary PCI alone. The first arm, that is the tenecteplase and PCI, out of that 27% required rescue PCI and 73% had scheduled PCIG and PCI. And second arm, there's a primary PCI, all went ahead. And conclusion is that with the 3,000 patients, it's a large study with STMI. Pharmacoinvasive strategy was associated with improved ST resolution and enhanced outcome within 1 year compared to primary PCI. This supports selective pharmacoinvasive reperfusion strategy when there is a delay to primary PCI exists. This is the graph. In fact, if in the graph you say the event rate is a bit higher in the primary PCI strategy, possibly due to bleeding or something. The third evidence is a meta-analysis actually. It is a comparison of reperfusion strategies for ST elevation MI. Is a multivariate network meta-analysis published in the Journal of American Heart Association in 2020. They analyzed 31 contemporary trials identified with STMI reperfusion. 3 following strategies used. Number 1, fibrinolysis alone is over 4,000 patients. Primary PCI is over 6,000 patients. And fibrinolysis and early PCI is as well over 5,000 patients. This number 3 approach categorized as facilitated PCI if it is less than 2 hours after thrombolysis, and pharmacoinvasive strategy if the interval more than 2 hours. I'm going to the findings straight away. Results of the meta-analysis showing primary PCI was associated with the lowest risk of mortality, non-fatal infarction, stroke, major bleeding compared with thrombolysis. And pharmacoinvasive approach was the next most favorable with better ratio of death compared with fibrinolysis. And pharmacoinvasive strategy showing lower adverse outcome compared with facilitated approach. For the final conclusion, a pharmacoinvasive approach is safe and effective than facilitated approach compared to fibrinolytic only. So whenever the primary PCI question doesn't come here at all. So really facilitated approach is not a right thing. When logistic available, primary PCI not possible, this pharmacoinvasive strategy can be adapted. But It must be. However, this pharmacokinetic is better thing. I'm going to the next slide that will show you. This is a facilitated PCI compared with primary PCI. If you see, facilitated PCI has lost out in all three grades: mortality, reinfarction, major bleeding. The facilitated PCI, that means routine PCI 2 hours after thrombolysis, has lost the game. So it's not really advisable. This is a guideline. A planned reperfusion strategy using full dose stimulated therapy followed by immediate PCI is not recommended and may be harmful. This is class 3B indication. That is the facilitated PCI. This I'm not going anymore. Okay, next slide. Now let's come to question: what about the extreme late presentation? If it is more than 24 hours, very unfortunately, this is quite common in our country. They come very late after 2 to 3 days. There's one trial available, occluded artery trial, OAT. It was published in NEJM in 2006. The eligible study is confirmed index MI, total infarct-related artery occlusion, and MI is more than 24 hours and between up to 28 days. So 1 day to 28 days. There's an inclusion criteria, and exclusion criteria is significant left main disease or 3 vessels coronary disease, hemodynamic or electrical instability, rest or low threshold angina, and NOHA class 3-4 heart failure or shock. Means patients who are really unstable, they are excluded. And patients who are stable, asymptomatic, they were included in the trial. So this trial included 2,166 patients, out of which 1,082 patients went for PCI plus optimal medical therapy, 1,084 patients optical medical therapy only, and 4-year event rate was calculated: death, MI, and heart failure. If you see, the 72.2% PCI patient actually had event rate more than medical management. Although p-value is not significant, but you can see the event rate little higher in the PCI group. Same is true in the fatal and non-fatal MI, 4-year event rate little bit higher in the PCI group. Even p-value is not significant, but event rate is little higher. The study indicates that after 24 hours, if the patient is hemodynamically stable, asymptomatic, unless and until you have a very good evidence for ischemia, you really don't need the intervention. Patient can stay on medical therapy as well. So that's the guideline. PCI for hemodynamically significant stenosis in patient with infarct related greater than 24 hours after STMI may be considered invasive strategy. Still, this class 2B and evidence of B. Means you have to have a good evidence to do an intervention in those cases. And PCI of a totally occluded infarct artery greater than 24 hours after STMI is not recommended in asymptomatic patients with 1 or 2 vessel disease if they're hemodynamically and electrically stable and do not have evidence of severe ischemia. If you indication in those cases is class 3, evidence is B. And this is the slide. Actually, Professor Mir Jamaluddin already presented the ESC guideline with the COVID patient, STMI patient COVID era. I'm not going to detail anymore. The only important thing to keep in mind that patients suffering with COVID or suspected COVID or confirmed COVID, they are also eligible for primary PCI if you have the facilities. The staff safety rule must be maintained, proper PPE and cath lab cleaning must be maintained. Keeping in mind, once you do primary PCI in a suspected patient or a confirmed patient, the cath lab must be deep cleaned and should be fumigated and should be closed down for at least 2 to 6 hours, depending on the expertise of the hospital. If there's any doubt, then perform fibrinolysis if not contraindicated. So I'm not going to do this COVID thing anymore. So take-home message. Take-home message, this delay has to be avoided as much as possible. Keep in mind that primary PCI is the gold standard of care and must not be denied if on-site facilities are available. Primary PCI is not possible for whatsoever the reason. Patient should be thrombolized with one of the TPA if available and patient can afford it. If TPI is not possible, the minimum STK should be given. Post-thrombolysis, ideally patient should be transferred to a facility with cath lab services as early as possible with proper counseling. Early invasive treatment within 24 hours should be the aim after full assessment. COVID screen, if necessary, you can do the antigen test for quick screening. However, keeping in mind the antigen test not necessarily diagnostic. And as I mentioned, active infection with MI, COVID infection with MI, although there is no comparative data available between thrombolysis, primary PCI, but there is no absolute contraindication to PCI. All depends on the facilities available. Every patient has to be judged individually. Thank you very much.
Very nice and brilliant presentation. Due to time constraint, there are lots of questions, but we'll be taking 4 questions for 4 presenters. So first, I'll go to Professor Dhiman Bonik, sir. There is a question. If we are going to have a choice between streptokinase and tenecteplase, which would you prefer and why? Dhiman Bonik, sir.
Tenecteplase should be a preferred one. Tenecteplase should be a preferred one. As we got the tenecteplase, with tenecteplase, TIMI3 flow is around 70 to 75%. And with streptokinase, TIMI3 flow is 40 to 42%. This matters only with the cost in our country.
Thank you, sir. So there is a next question to Professor Chaudhry Ehsan, sir. Is when to do troponin I to anticipate mortality risk as levels vary in time? Which time would you prefer to do the troponin I?
So in the original, if we look at, it was like a binary definition that troponin positive, troponin negative. The current guidelines, they call it 0, 1 in the very high sensitive 5th generation, but you can do 0, 3 hours. But the magnitude of troponin rise is also important. Troponin alone is not to be determined, because troponin can be very high for a variety of reasons. But if you look at the magnitude beyond 50, only few differential, like MI or myocarditis. But I call it small troponin or mini troponin. Mini means less than 1 or 1,000. Or small means less than 5 or 5,000, because 5th generation, simply you divide that by 1,000. But absolute value of troponin is very important also. But we need to take into consideration the totality of information. And it is better to think about all the things that I mentioned, that refractory angina, dynamic EKG changes, the sustained VT, resuscitation, complication, shock, heart failure. In the absence of all these immediate red flag, then you look at the yellow flags, like troponin very high, no explanation for the troponin, wall motion abnormality, still has some residual pain, all these things. And then this is just your immediate bedside assessment. But TIMI risk score is not difficult. I find GRACE or Pursuit a little bit difficult, but TIMI is only 7. And if it is more than 3, you already are in the moderate high group. And it is 5 to 7 is really high group. So I'll go by that.
So the next question is to Professor Mir Jamal, sir. So what steps can be taken to popularize the primary PCI in Bangladesh, sir?
Thank you. Thank you for asking the question. What steps to be taken to popularize the primary PCI in Bangladesh in this COVID era? That is the issue. Otherwise, the primary PCI in Bangladesh is well established and most of the centers are doing. And even in this COVID era, last year, when COVID started, at that time, most of the cath lab door was a bit closed. But in this year, probably so far I know all of the institutes, including the National Institute, Sir Salimullah Medical College, and other private institutes, they are doing the primary PCI. For this, practically what we need, that is a dedicated cath lab in this COVID era. If the hospital has 2 cath lab in 2 zones, then 1 zone may be dedicated to that COVID era, COVID patients, and the healthcare workers' safety is very important. We shall have to supply the healthcare workers adequate PPE and other logistics what is necessary, and cath lab should be a negative pressurized cath lab, and it should be dedicated, not any other procedure should be done in that cath lab. But it is a bit difficult in our country. For that reason, I think I do agree mostly with Dr. Shams Monwar to switch from primary PCI to pharmacoinvasive PCI if you have not the facility for primary PCI in a dedicated zone for the COVID positive patients. And that is the most important for our country. And if we can arrange that special cath lab, then we can do primary PCI. Thank you.
Sir, can I add something, sir?
Yes.
Jamal, sir, can I add something?
Yes.
Sir, how is the rapid antigen test? If the rapid antigen test is available,
Yes,
then we can do the.
Very soon it has become available, but not in all centers.
Yes, sir.
Not in all centers, and that is also a obstacle. If it is available in all centers, very soon, for last 1 week, probably government has given it in the many institutes, and now it will be feasible to do, as because it is recommended by ESC and SCC by all that 1 hour extra time for COVID era, for COVID patients.
Sir,
And that is why we can, we should be able to do primary PCI furthermore with availability of this rapid antigen test, and which is possible and is present in my institute also. So far I know it is also present in your institute and
Yes, sir.
National
Yes, sir. We have
United
got the
Hospital.
we have got the
Apollo
permission.
Hospital.
Sir. Yes, sir. We have got the
Evidently.
permission.
Thank you, sir.
This-
So we'll take our last question. It is for Shams Monwar, sir. If PCI is not done within 72 hours of STME, how long should we wait?
Well, really speaking, thank you very much for the question. Very tricky question. Actually, most of our patients, they come late. That's our usual practice. They come after 7 days, 14 days. Just take the thrombolysis, disappear, come after 2 to 3 weeks. You have to assess the patient, actually. What is the problem? How much symptom patient has? How much evidence of ischemia has? You do that angiogram as early as possible, as early as feasible. You assess the anatomy, you assess the actually level of ischemia, then you make a decision. As I mentioned, if it is single vessel disease and there's no evidence of ischemia and patient is hemodynamically stable, there's no problem. There's not much indication of actually perfusion. You can go ahead for the ischemia assessment studies, just like myocardial perfusion imaging, dobutamine stress echo. You have to demonstrate some evidence of ischemia before you do the intervention in those cases. However, if the patient has multivessel disease, patient has some degree of symptoms of ischemia or ECG changes ongoing, then you have to go with the revascularization as early as possible. There's no fixed time limit about it, actually.
Thank you, sir. So due to time constraint, we'll take comments from our panelists in a very brief way. I would like to invite Dr. Tawfiq Shahriar Haq, sir, to give his brief comments, sir.
So may I make a comment before for
Sure,
the
sir. Yes, sir.
for the STEMI delayed? We know from the OAT trial that the delayed presentation, there was no benefit except in few situations where there was, you can demonstrate post-infarct angina or post-infarct large residual ischemia, as Shams Monwar just said. One other thing I wanted to mention, particularly in COVID time, Mir Jamal Bhai pointed out the aspiration is not, but in the guidelines, if you look at, it's not really class 3, it's a routine aspiration is class 3. So there is a role for aspiration in a cohort of cases. But I think the guideline was trying to say that routine aspiration is not recommended.
Yes,
But in the COVID time, as you pointed out, the aspiration probably has a bigger role.